Evan had never thought he would be anywhere near royalty. He was just an engineer, a quiet human working on the orbiting diplomatic outpost above Zerathia, a planet far from Earth. Most humans were uneasy around the Valorians. Their towering forms, silver skin and sharp, intelligent eyes could intimidate anyone. Yet Evan had a fascination that went beyond fear. He loved studying their culture, their honor codes, and especially their queen Elira, who was as commanding as she was beautiful. She carried herself with a grace that could silence a room, and a presence that made the stars seem dim in comparison. It had been a long week. The diplomatic teams had been in tense talks with the Valorians for months, trying to ensure peace along contested sectors of space. Evan, for his part, had been mostly ignored in those talks. He was not a diplomat, not a soldier, just a maintenance technician who ensured the translator systems and reactor cores ran smoothly. That was his world, wires, screens, and hums of energy. But tonight something pulled him out of the quiet hum of machinery. He was sent to inspect the communication dome late at night. The room was vast, with a transparent ceiling that revealed the sparkling stars beyond. Elira stood there alone, staring at the cosmos. Her silver skin glowed faintly in the starlight, making her appear almost ethereal. Evan hesitated at the doorway, unsure if he should interrupt. But she turned, and her sharp eyes met his. "Evan," she said softly, "come closer. The view is better from here." He swallowed nervously and approached, feeling the weight of her gaze. He had spoken to her before, but never like this, alone, without the ceremony, without the guards hovering nearby. For the first time, she seemed approachable, almost human. They began to talk casually. He told her about Earth, how humans celebrated festivals, how families joked and argued over dinner, and how simple laughter could bridge the hardest moments. She listened, tilting her head, intrigued. Valorians rarely laughed. Humor was not their way. It was risky, unpredictable. Feeling a sudden urge to lighten the tension, Evan chuckled and said, "You'd make a cute wife." The words left his mouth, and immediately the room froze. He saw it in her eyes first, a sharp widening, a stillness that wasn't just surprise. Her entire body seemed to hold its breath. The energy in the room shifted like a current snapping into place. "You accept?" she asked, her voice low, careful. Evan blinked. I was joking. I didn't mean..." But she stepped closer, her silver skin glowing brighter under the starlight. Her expression was serious, almost sacred. "I accept," she said. The words hit him like a meteor strike. In Valorian culture, to accept a mate declaration was binding, irrevocable, sacred. A queen could only accept once in her lifetime, and it was a decision that affected not just her life, but her entire species. Evan laughed nervously, trying to explain himself. "I didn't mean it seriously. It was just a joke." Elira's gaze did not waver. The hum of energy around them seemed to respond to her certainty. "A joke is still a choice," she said. "And fate has chosen you." The air around them thickened. The doors burst open and guards flooded the room. They bowed, heads low, announcing that the queen's mate had been chosen. Evan's heart pounded as he realized that he was no longer just a human technician. He had become a figure of immense importance, watched by an entire civilization. He stumbled back, trying to process what was happening. Human diplomats were panicking, whispering about the potential collapse of negotiations. The Valorian priests began preparations for the ceremonial bond. It was an honor, but also a responsibility far beyond anything he had imagined, and the queen herself, silent and composed, seemed almost curious about him. The next few hours passed in a blur. Evan was escorted through vast halls, treated like royalty, and questioned by Valorian officials. Everywhere he went, eyes watched him, measuring his reactions, noting his every movement. He was overwhelmed but also strangely fascinated. For a human, this was extraordinary, and for Elira, it seemed as though she was testing him, observing his ability to adapt to this new reality. That night, Elira invited him to her private chamber. It was not the grand ceremonial room, but a smaller, serene space filled with soft light and delicate artwork depicting Valorian history. She gestured for him to sit. Evan obeyed, heart racing. "I need to understand," she said, sitting across from him. "What did you mean by cute?" Evan swallowed. He had no idea how to explain it to a queen, especially one who was bound by codes he barely understood. "It's hard to explain," he admitted. It's not about beauty or power. It's about kindness, warmth, someone who can make life better just by being there, someone who cares even when it's difficult. Elira tilted her head, thinking. She had never considered a mate in this way. Most unions among Valorians were strategic, meant to strengthen power or alliance, but she saw something in Evan's words that resonated, a spark of honesty, bravery, and humility. Something she had never experienced. See, she said slowly. Her eyes softened for the first time. Perhaps, I wish to be cute for you, human. Evan's stomach tightened. This was no longer a joke. The Queen, the most powerful being on the planet, wanted to connect with him on a personal level. And somehow, despite the absurdity of the situation, he felt a flutter of hope. Over the next few hours, they talked more. Elira shared stories of her childhood, of the weight of ruling a warrior race, of battles fought and alliances made. Evan listened, fascinated, and offered stories of Earth in return. Each shared story brought them closer, bridging the gap between species. He realized that beneath her strength and command, Elira was lonely. She bore responsibilities that humans could barely imagine, and yet she still yearned for connection. When dawn broke over the capital, Evan found himself standing beside the Queen once more, looking out at the planet below. For a moment, it felt as if the galaxy had paused, waiting for their next move. You are unlike any human I have met, Elira said softly. And yet, perhaps I am unlike any queen I have been. Evan smiled nervously. I guess we both surprised each other. She turned to him, eyes glimmering with the first hint of a smile. Yes, and tomorrow, the universe will witness our choice. Are you prepared, Evan? He took a deep breath, knowing that his life had changed in ways he could never have imagined. I think I will try, he said honestly. The Queen nodded. Try, human, and perhaps we will both discover what it truly means to connect across worlds. As he left her chamber, Evan's mind raced. He had joked about a universe-altering concept, and now it was real. The next day would be filled with ceremonies, rituals, and eyes upon him at every turn. But for the first time, he felt a spark of something he had never known. Hope, curiosity, and even excitement. And for Elira, the Queen who had ruled with strength and precision for decades, the spark was more than curiosity. It was the possibility of something she had never allowed herself to feel. Companionship and, perhaps in her own way, love. Outside, the stars shone brightly, as if celebrating this unlikely bond. And somewhere in the quiet hum of the outpost, a human and a queen prepared for a moment that could change the fate of two worlds forever. Evan paused and looked at the vast sky above Zerathia. He whispered to himself, I didn't expect this, but maybe it's exactly what the universe intended. With a final glance at the stars, he knew there was no turning back. The joke had set fate in motion, and tomorrow, the galaxy would bear witness to a human standing beside an alien queen, an unthinkable pair chosen by chance, but perhaps guided by something greater than either of them could understand. And in the quiet of that moment, both human and queen understood the truth of the galaxy. Sometimes, the smallest words could have the greatest power. The morning sun rose over Zerathia, scattering silver light across the crystalline towers of the capital. The entire Valorian city stirred, more alive than Evan had ever seen it. Banners glimmered in the wind, and the hum of energy from the city's power conduits seemed louder, sharper, as if the world itself sensed the significance of the day. Today was not just any day. It was the day Evan would stand beside Queen Elira in the royal bond ceremony, a ritual that had never before included a human. Evan woke in the guest quarters assigned to him, his heart pounding in rhythm with the activity outside. He looked at himself in the mirror and realized how unprepared he felt. He wasn't a diplomat, a warrior, or even a proper guest of royalty. He was just a human who had made a joke, one that had spiraled into destiny. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to calm his nerves. When he arrived at the grand ceremonial hall, the scale of the event became immediately clear. The hall stretched farther than any human structure he had ever seen, filled with Valorian nobles in elaborate ceremonial garb. Every eye was on him as he stepped forward, a human among the tallest, most regal beings in the galaxy. Elira awaited him at the center of the hall. She wore ceremonial armor that glinted with silver and gold, the design both fierce and elegant. Her presence radiated authority, yet when she saw Evan, the sternness softened. She extended her hand and he took it, feeling the pulse of energy that surrounded her. The ritual began with chants, ancient words that resonated through the hall. Energy arcs formed around the central dais, spinning in complex patterns that reflected the starry sky outside. Evan could feel the power of Valorian tradition pressing against him, a force that was alien and awe-inspiring. He looked at Elira, whose eyes were steady, calm, and fixed on him. Despite the grandeur and tension, there was trust in her gaze. Just as the final blessing was about to be pronounced, the doors of the hall burst open. A group of warlords, men and women of enormous stature and intimidating presence, stormed in. Their voices thundered with anger, demanding to know how a human could claim the right to stand beside the queen. Their weapons glinted menacingly, and the energy of the hall shifted with their aggression. Evan froze for a moment, heart hammering in panic. Diplomats shouted, guards readied themselves, and the hall teetered on the edge of chaos. He could see the queen unmoved but tense. The moment called for a decision, and instinct took over. Before anyone could react, Evan stepped forward, placing himself between the queen and the advancing warlords. A blaster discharged toward her, a streak of lethal energy. Evan flung his body in front of her, catching the edge of the blast on his arm. Pain lanced through him, but he stayed upright. The blast dissipated, leaving a scorched mark on the floor where he had been standing. The hall fell silent. Even the warlords froze, shock and disbelief flashing across their faces. Here was a human, frail compared to them, risking his life for their queen. The absurdity, the courage, and the sincerity of it all struck every onlooker. Elira's voice cut through the silence, clear and commanding. "You question his worth? He protects your queen when you raise weapons." Her eyes blazed, her energy flaring, a display of power that few dared oppose. The warlords hesitated, the weight of her words pressing down on them. One by one, they lowered their weapons, kneeling in recognition of the bond and the human's courage. The hall relaxed, the tension dissolving into a quiet hum of approval. Evan stood breathless and shaking, but unharmed. The ritual continued. Energy arcs encircled them, and a soft golden light bathed the queen and her chosen human. He felt it first in his chest, a warmth, a vibration, a connection that was not just physical but almost spiritual. Memories, feelings, and a deep sense of understanding passed through him. He realized that this bond was not simply a tradition. It was a merging of intent, purpose, and trust between two beings. Elira's hand tightened around his. Her eyes searched his as if seeking confirmation, understanding, and acceptance. He nodded, the enormity of the moment sinking in. "I accept," he whispered. A statement that was no longer a joke but a choice, a declaration, and a commitment. The energy surged, spiraling higher, and the entire hall was bathed in radiant light. It felt as though the stars themselves had descended to witness the union. The queen and the human stood together, one being and one not, a symbol of unity across species, across worlds. After the ritual, the hall erupted into cheers, muted by the sheer reverence of what had just occurred. Diplomats and nobles alike approached, some in disbelief, some in admiration. Evan felt a strange mixture of pride, relief, and awe. He had entered this ceremony as a simple human engineer, and he left it as a symbol of courage, choice, and connection. Later, in the quiet of the palace gardens, Evan walked beside Elira. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the crystalline structures, painting everything in hues of gold and silver. The queen looked at him with a rare softness, no longer the imperious ruler, but someone approachable, almost human in her presence. "You were brave today," she said, her voice lighter than it had ever been. "I have seen many warriors, many heroes, but you chose to protect me when it mattered most." Evan shook his head, feeling awkward under her praise. "I was just trying not to get us both killed," he admitted. He smiled faintly. "I didn't think a human could make a difference here." "You made a difference," Elira said, stepping closer. "Not because you are human, but because you are willing to act with courage, with honesty, and with heart." He looked at her, taking in the weight of her words. Here was a being who had ruled a warrior race, fought battles across galaxies, and carried the burden of generations. And yet she had chosen him, not out of obligation, but out of recognition of something deeper. Something real. They sat on a bench carved from the crystal of Zerathia itself. Elira studied him quietly, then asked, "Do you know what it means to be my mate human?" Evan swallowed. "I think..." It means responsibility, trust, and perhaps more than I can understand. But I also think it means learning. About each other, about your people, about myself. She smiled, and it was like the first hint of dawn after a long, dark night. Then you are ready. Together we will learn. Over the next few days, Evan found himself immersed in the life of the Valorian court. He was trained in protocols, studied the history of the Queen's rule, and even learned basic combat techniques, enough to survive should danger arise again. Yet despite the formality, there was laughter too. Small moments where Alira would tease him about his human habits, where he would correct her pronunciation of Earth words, and where they would share stories under the stars. The Valorian people slowly accepted him. At first there had been murmurs, doubts about the place of a human beside their queen. But the image of Evan shielding Alira during the ceremony became legendary. Courage and loyalty mattered more than species. And in time, he became not just the queen's mate but a respected figure in the city, a symbol of the bond between worlds. One evening, as they watched the twin moons rise over Zerathia, Alira turned to him. "You know, human, you still make jokes at the most impossible times," Evan laughed. "I guess some habits never die." She reached out, brushing a hand against his cheek. "And yet, that joke changed the fate of two worlds." He smiled, looking into her eyes, and realized that the joke was the beginning, not the end. It had led to danger, to choice, to understanding, and to the most unexpected connection either of them had ever known. For the first time, Evan understood the quiet power of small moments, small words. How a single joke could ripple through destiny, altering everything in ways he had never imagined. And for Alira, the queen who had ruled for decades with unmatched authority, she understood that even the mightiest ruler could choose a new path, one of companionship, trust, and perhaps in her own way love. The stars above Zerathia shone brightly that night, reflecting in the silver of her skin and in the wide eyes of a human who had dared to joke. And as they walked together through the quiet city, two beings from different worlds, the universe seemed to hold its breath, acknowledging that sometimes the smallest choice could change the fate of many. Evan looked at Alira and whispered, "I didn't expect this. But maybe I was meant to find it." She smiled, stepping closer. Sometimes the universe speaks through the smallest words. Today it spoke through a joke. And in that moment, human and queen, engineer and ruler, laughter and destiny intertwined. Two worlds had been forever changed, not by power, not by battle, but by courage, choice, and the quiet bravery of a human heart willing to step forward. The galaxy waited, and together they would face it, not as ruler and subject, but as partners, as companions, as something neither had expected yet both had chosen.